The Seattle Seahawks are back. 2 years ago, this was a franchise stuck in neutral. Competitive, but forgettable. Good, but never feared. Then, Mike MacDonald arrived, a 38-year-old first-time head coach who many thought was a gamble. Now, Seattle is a nightmare matchup, a relentless, disciplined, suffocating force that's gone from hovering around 500 to standing clear as the NFL's most dangerous unit. This transformation didn't happen by accident, and the real story behind it isn't being talked about nearly enough. This is what they aren't telling you about Mike MacDonald. For starters, let's talk about the man himself, and what got him to this point. After graduating from high school, MacDonald attended the University of Georgia's Business School and graduated with the highest distinction, offering him plenty of lucrative opportunities in the business world. But such was MacDonald's love for football and his willingness to stay involved with the sport that he turned down a summer internship in financial consulting to instead coach the freshman football team at Cedar Shoals High School in Athens, Georgia. MacDonald didn't have to do this, but he realized as early as 7th grade that this was his true calling in life. MacDonald was a details guy, even as a 13-year-old, getting his father to film games so he could rewatch film to give himself and his teammates more of an advantage at every turn. 25 years later, MacDonald is still that same guy. Analytical, hardworking, and desperate to squeeze every last drop out of his players as well as himself. After several years on the coaching staff at Georgia, where he was also studying for a master's degree in sports management, he earned himself his first job in pro football, working for John Harbaugh's Baltimore Ravens as a coaching intern in 2014. On Harbaugh's coaching staff, he impressed enough to keep rising through the ranks, with Harbaugh and the rest of the staff in Baltimore quickly realizing exactly what they had on their hands. Early on, fellow coach Chris Horton said of MacDonald, "You just realize how fast he gets done with work, and he'd be on the other stuff. He'd be sitting in there almost game planning like he was going to make the calls. The dude is sharp. I knew early on that he was going to be special." However, in 2021, MacDonald left the Ravens after being offered a job to become the defensive coordinator at the University of Michigan after John Harbaugh recommended him to his brother Jim. By the end of his first and only season with the Wolverines, it was clear that he was well suited to his new role as leader of the defense and, crucially, as a leader of men. In the COVID-affected 2020 season, the Michigan defense was a disaster, giving up 34.5 points per game, ranking 95th out of the 128 defenses in Division I that year. Once MacDonald stepped foot in the building and got his hands on this defense, they rocketed up to the 8th best in football, giving up almost half as many points per game as the previous season and earning their school their first Big Ten football title in 17 years. Whilst Jim Harbaugh, of course, received most of the credit for reviving the program in Michigan, he understood just how important a role Mike MacDonald had played in this transformation, both as a defensive genius, but also as a real culture setter who understood how to get the very best out of his guys, while driving them towards greatness. Harbaugh said, "One thing I'll say about Mike is that he's himself, and that's every day. He's a great coach, but there's humility too there. Some coaches make the mistake. You have a great year as a coach and someone gives you Coach of the Year, and that's great, you're Coach of the Year. That doesn't make you Coach of the Decade." Mike understands that, and understands that every year is a new year and you have to attack it the same way every year. Don't get a big head. That's a trap. That's a deep, dark, lonely trap. Same for coaches and same for players. Couldn't say enough good things about Mike. Having watched his own Ravens team suffer a devastating late season collapse in 2021, losing their final 6 games to finish 8-9 and missing the playoffs entirely, Harbaugh's older brother John needed a new defensive coordinator in Baltimore himself, and he had zero hesitation in giving that job straight to Mike MacDonald. This was exactly what the team needed, someone who would demand the very best out of his players and would attack every offense with the sharp analytical mind that he demonstrated throughout his coaching career. It was here that the NFL world really got a sense of the Mike MacDonald who had been working his way up in the shadows for a decade, as his Ravens defense began to play with the same intensity and strategy that his Michigan defense had the year prior. Just as it had been in Ann Arbor, the results were obvious, as he authored another exceptional turnaround, getting the Ravens back on the level of fearsome defense that the franchise had previously prided itself on, back in the days of Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and Terrell Suggs. In just 1 year, MacDonald transformed the unit, turning the league's 19th best scoring defense into the 3rd in just 12 months, and becoming the league's very best in his second season on the job in 2023. This turnaround was achieved partly through the additions of Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, and Roquan Smith, who joined from the Bears mid-season. But MacDonald achieved this result mostly through players who were already on the roster. This was a more cohesive, more aggressive defense than Baltimore fans had seen in years, and MacDonald was at the forefront of it. Anyone who watched the Ravens in those 2 years could see the vision that MacDonald had for the defense and how quickly he was able to stamp his authority on the team. Those 2023 Ravens were so impressive defensively, and weren't only the league's best scoring defense, but they also ranked best in the league in sacks, passer rating allowed, and turnovers, becoming the suffocating force of nature that MacDonald had been looking for from the beginning of the year. Unsurprisingly, at the end of the 2023 season, MacDonald was hot property throughout the league, with many tipping him as the best coordinator in the NFL and the one most ready to take that step up. John Schneider and the Seattle Seahawks agreed. The Seahawks opted to move on from head coach Pete Carroll at the end of the 2024 season, bringing to an end an era in which he became by far the best coach in franchise history, winning 10 playoff games, reaching 2 Super Bowls, and winning 1, setting a standard that the team hadn't previously seen. Carroll is undeniably a legend in Seattle, but by the end of his time at Lumen Field, it looked as though the team needed a refresh, and with the team falling further behind their division rivals in Los Angeles and San Francisco, 2 franchises headed by elite offensive minds in Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, a change seemed inevitable. So many of the league's coaching hires in the last 5 years have been young offensive minds, trying to replicate the success of the Rams and the Niners. But Seattle took a different approach, especially as the game's premier defensive mind was on the market. So, on January 31st, 2024, the team appointed Mike MacDonald as the 9th head coach in franchise history, beginning a bold new era in Seattle. In MacDonald, they had found their own Sean McVay, or rather the Sean McVay of defense, as he's been called by many in the media and across the league. Obviously, this is extremely high praise, as McVay himself has gained a reputation as a boy wonder coach, and one whose teams have sparked a conveyor belt of copycats across pro football since he took charge of the Rams almost a decade ago. But the praise seems fitting for MacDonald. In the space of just 2 seasons, he's refreshed, rejuvenated, and re-energized a defense that had fallen behind in the last few years of the Carroll administration. This is a defense that's so well coached and so well organized, with every player on the team understanding their assignment on every play. Of course, the success of this defensive unit isn't just down to MacDonald's coaching. The team has elite talent across the defense, with Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones, and Devon Witherspoon all earning All-Pro honors for their efforts this year. But it's a unit coached to get the best out of everyone, with some veterans on this team playing the best football of their lives right now. Take Leonard Williams, a veteran defensive lineman who is now in his 11th year in the NFL, having previously played for the Jets and Giants. Williams has always been a solid pro, but this year, he was named second-team All-Pro for the first time in his career at the age of 31, as MacDonald and the rest of his staff continue to elevate his game to the next level. A big part of this defense's success is MacDonald's ability to be flexible with the team and dial up the correct blitz packages based on the personnel that he has on the field at that moment. His ability to rotate the personnel and move guys around the defense has become a real feature of how this team operates, disguising what the next move is and keeping the offense off balance throughout. Beyond the X's and O's of his defensive scheme though, MacDonald has become a true leader for this defense and the team as a whole. And he's got everyone in the organization 100% bought into his vision and what he's trying to achieve. Not long after taking the job, MacDonald spoke about the existing culture under the previous regime and commended Pete Carroll for what he had established over the 13 years he'd spent in charge. But there's no doubt that this defense simply looks different on the field right now, playing with an intensity and a passion that wasn't always there a few seasons ago. His players agree, with outside linebacker Derek Hall saying, "The connection and the positivity and the love we have for one another here is unmatched. I've never seen it before, and I told somebody else, I thought I really knew what a connection was until this season." Veteran tight end Eric Saubert, who is now on his 11th organization in the league, agreed with this, saying, "It's easy to follow someone like that, that's so genuine and has such a belief and practices what he preaches. He's the guy that led us the whole season, and it's never been a doubt. We've never faltered in how we follow him. He's the man. He's a great coach. He's a great person to talk to, and we're going to follow him to the end." MacDonald has his 4 core principles that he applies to every aspect of the team: brotherhood, truth, work, and violence. Watching these Seahawks in 2025, fans were left with no doubt that he'd got that message across to the team in full, with Seattle compiling a 14-3 record with the league's third highest scoring offense and the best scoring defense in the NFL. Since his departure, Baltimore hasn't been able to truly replace him. He really is one of a kind, and all across the league, the search has begun for the next Mike MacDonald, as they watch him tear up the league right now. The full extent of just how good MacDonald's defense is was shown in back-to-back wins over the 49ers in January, in the regular season finale and the NFC divisional round. Kyle Shanahan's 49ers were outscored 56-9 across 120 brutal, bruising minutes of football, with the Seahawks imposing their will on their rivals on every single play. This was Mike MacDonald's vision in full effect. Everyone fighting for each other, having each other's backs, and playing a brand of superbly coached, violent football that made the 12th man in Seattle think back to the peak of the Legion of Boom days, led by the likes of Bobby Wagner, Earl Thomas, and Richard Sherman. Sherman himself is a big fan of how this team looks right now and is extremely impressed with the job MacDonald has done.
When you hire a guy like this, a guy who's never been a head coach, I don't think you could ever expect him in his second year to have this much success, this much impact, but he's done a phenomenal job with not only the scheme that he runs, but the culture of the team, keeping his hand on the pulse of the team, putting the right guys in the building. You got to give John Snyder a ton of credit.
Few know more about building a successful culture in Seattle than Richard Sherman, who anchored one of the most fearsome defenses in league history during the early 2010s, including that famous dismantling of Peyton Manning's Broncos in Super Bowl 48. Now, after a thrilling 31-27 win over the Rams in the NFC Championship game, the Seahawks are back in the big game for the first time in 11 years, and look set to bring that Lombardi trophy back to the Pacific Northwest. All year, this team appears to have been ignored and slept on, but now, you can't do that anymore. Mike MacDonald has carried out one of the great coaching jobs of recent times, and now only the New England Patriots stand between them and a Super Bowl. Having watched this Seahawks team all year, the team are favorites for a reason, and look set to cap off an incredible season with some well-earned hardware. But how good do you think Mike MacDonald is? Let us know in the comments.